I'm trying to depict that a person can only see the light through a sefer, meaning that a person in that zone, when they're with Sfarim, they're learning and they're participating, meaning they're learning a Maimer, a Sicha, a Siman in Shulchan Aruch, a Daf Gemara, because that is the truth and the core of their existence and their window to the heavens, so to say. That's what I'm trying to depict.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Benzi Afson, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Alrighty, we are here in Brownsville with Rabbi Mendel Treitel. Let me start that again. All right, now take a sip of coffee. Gotta wake up.
But I'm waiting when to say it. I'm curious to know when you think our first conversation happened.
I don't think we had a conversation. I mean,
Our
interaction.
first interaction.
Well, online, I think I probably commented on your art. Whenever I see something interesting, I comment. I mean, I don't comment like a bored soul, but I hope I said something nice to you.
Mm-hmm.
I hope.
No, you did, but I'm going way back to 2006 in Gan Yisrael, New York.
That has nothing to do with it.
Yarchikala, yeah.
Alrighty, okay, so we'll get there. Alrighty, okay, I'm here with Rabbi Mendel Treitel, artist Mendel Treitel. We have known each other a little bit online, and you were beginning to tell me that you met me earlier in my life in New York. You were a classmate. You were a bunkmate of one of my brothers.
No, your cousin Benzi Shemt of Uruguay was our counselor.
Yeah, I remember that summer. I came towards the end of the summer.
Yarchikala.
No, I think I was just finishing Argentina. I didn't come for Yarchikala. I think Argentina just finished. I came for Yarchikala. Okay, so
I think it was Shabbos Yarchikala.
No, and
you came to our bunk to tell us a story
about
that there was a man who went to a restaurant who didn't have any money to pay for his food, and he told the owner, "If you don't feed me, I'm going to do to you what my father did. I'm going to do what my father did." And it kept going on. The guy said, "I can't give you food." So he said, "I'm going to do what my father did." So the guy gives him a whole meal, and he eats and everything. And the guy says, "I'm just curious, what did your father do?" He said, "I went to sleep hungry."
The old Jewish joke.
Yeah, so I still remember that as Gan Yisrael Yarchikala 2006 in Gan Yisrael, New York. So I think that was my first time encountering you.
Okay. Well, I'm not that funny in real life, and it's the closest I've ever come to being a counselor in camp. I never really made it, but that's funny that I'd be remembered that way by someone. Anyway, shout out to Benzi, listener of the pod. Hey Benzi. Anyway, so Mendel is an artist in Sydney, who lives today in Sydney, Australia, from Montreal. I came across your art online. Maybe someone told me about you or whatever. But I came across your art online. And what struck me right away was that, on one hand, you're very openly, a Lubavitcher, and not just because you have a beard, but also like there were, even in your art or in your process of art, you would have like Svarim around, and I wasn't reading too much into it, but it was obvious that you're a Lubavitcher. But on the other hand, your art was not at all typical
Judaic.
It was not Judaica, but it also just wasn't. It was like very modern and flowers and a lion, I remember, and people like I don't. I'm gonna embarrass myself if I try to categorize it. But expressionist? No, it's way past that. Where hands and heads are not connected. What's that called?
So it's hard to fully categorize it. It's modern art.
Modern art.
But now it's figurative, meaning there's human figures.
So it's already less modern than the people who paint nothing.
That's abstract, yeah.
Right. So it's not, your thing is not considered abstract anymore.
I don't think so, because you see figures. There's identifiable figures. Whereas abstract,
So Picasso's not considered abstract anymore.
I don't think so. He's a version. He's like the avant-garde of France, which is
Right.
after post-impressionism, which would be Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
So that Van Gogh is impressionism,
Right.
was post-impressionism, and Picasso is after that. So already towards the beginning of the 19th century, art becomes less defined by visual statements, visual style, and becomes more, till today, it's more unique to the painter, and there's less of a focus on the shlichus,
Right.
exactly, of art. So you'll have different elements in a singular artist or painting of different styles of art.
Right. So things basically fell apart in terms of uniformity and all trying to follow a similar path.
Yeah, but that's part of that's part of sort of the whole shlichus of art and the subject of art as being this linear shlichus, we'll call it.
Right.
That really brings up the conversation, which I don't know if that's the focus right now, on the meaning of art. Meaning to say, when modern art came to America in the 1930s, let's say the MoMA in Manhattan, right? There was a big war against it, like all the art critics and even politicians, because it represented not seeing reality. It represented distorting reality to some form of subjective experience.
And this was even before Picasso, right? This is like
this
Monet and people who are what we today would, like amateurs like me, would think as like old-fashioned art because it shows a river and an actual thing. And even then, people were upset about it, right? Because it wasn't in the real old style. It wasn't 100%.
Reality. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe we will get to there. I'm not.
My point is, I don't know exactly where my art fits in terms of the specific location.
It doesn't fit into the typical chossid art gallery that we can agree on.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we have some of it sitting here and plenty more online if you want to go check it out. But yeah, so I mean, I think let's start with how did a nice Lubavitch boy from Montreal end up painting faces without hands or without torsos?
I'm just debating where to start and really try to understand the question. Like, there's the practical journey of it, or the how can it be? Meaning, how did it happen, or how can it be that such a thing happened?
Let's start with how it happened. Just the story.
Okay, so how it happened is that from when I was about 6-7 years old, I started drawing, and basically never stopped. Classes going on, I'm doodling. Even in Yeshiva, which we may get to, I become very studious and pursuing learning very heavily. Even then, on the margins of many of my svarim, till today, there's a lot of drawings, definitely in the book ends, drawing all the time, anytime.
What are you drawing? Just
anything. No, it's not Judaic. It's usually very similar to what I'm painting now.
Flowers.
No, so now it's people. It's just people in certain states of mind, basically, which you can see. It's usually someone sitting by a book. Many times that's the case from Yeshiva till now.
That's what you were painting then?
Flowers. I was drawing then. Mm-hmm. I did paint flowers for a while, but I don't do as much anymore. Mm-hmm. Now it's back to those Yeshiva drawings, I call them, which are basically people with books usually, or people sitting alone and thinking and things like that. And there's all different drawings of that throughout my life, basically. And just drawing. And then I sort of developed a little bit of a specific style on my own, not even knowing of Picasso, definitely not what his paintings looked like or anything. And then fast forward a little more, I was a shliach in LA, Mesifta, and the kids thought it was the drawings very exciting. And they would collect them. They would go to where I was learning, and they would take the papers that I left on the table, and it was a whole game to collect basically all these little doodles that I made, and some of them still have them till today.
Really?
Yeah. So all those things.
But 1 second. So you would be learning a Gemara.
Yeah.
And then you would start like kind of drifting off and painting, like
drawing. the
No,
pencil.
okay, but I'm saying you,
Yeah.
you were drifting off
Yeah.
like everybody kind of spaces
Yeah.
out, and instead of falling asleep or
Yeah.
whatever a Bakram would do,
Yeah.
you started drawing.
And then I would go right back in after 5 minutes.
Right. So
And
is
then
it?
back out.
Mm,
And yeah, so again, it started definitely with being completely not participating in class or the shir, but then as time progressed and yeshiva progressed and my pursuit of Yiddishkeit and learning progressed, it never was absent at
mm,
any stage. So maybe it was less time or more time, but the concept, the creative flow was always with me, was always very present.
right. I mean, so clearly it's something that comes naturally to you, like
Yeah.
the same way that some kids pick up a guitar at a young age
Yeah.
and they just figure out how to play music. They're just something about the way that they are, the
Yeah.
way that they're born it makes them able to figure out music in a way that most people would need to go to classes and
Yeah.
spend who knows how long.
But it's
to
also,
figure
it's
out.
more than that. It's not just a skill that comes natural. And I think the same is for music. It's also almost like a need in a way. It's a certain,
Right,
it's something, it's a certain voice that's screaming out within you that needs to be
right.
expressed and needs to go outside.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that, but I think very often people jump to that. I'll get to that in a second. I think
Yeah.
people jump to this kind of inner torment, conflict.
Yeah.
You know, Chaim Patak, My Name is Asher Lev. I'm sure you read that,
Yeah.
and we could get to that. I think that book is a load of nonsense, in my opinion.
I think it's amazing.
Okay, great. It was a great conversation. I think, yeah, whatever. Now I'm interested to hear what you think about it, but I think a lot of times people jump to the conflict of like,
The
is
romance.
art no, it's like are you, you're an artist, but you shouldn't be an artist, but I need to be an artist. And so it's like, like, are you being true to yourself? And we're going straight to that modern day question of authenticity and who am I, when I think that, at the very, like, before you get there, I'm not saying it's not true, but before you get there, there's just the idea that some people are good at certain things, right? They're just like the person standing on the outside who's looking at you doodling doesn't even comprehend how easy this comes to you. It's not only about like your inner soul, it's just something that you're doing. It's not in a way, people I think project too much into it because they don't understand how easily it comes to you. They think that you must be doing it because all this is going on inside of you, when really it's just, this is like, it comes second nature. Like, some
Yeah.
people are just born this way. Like they're good at drawing. They like drawing. That's what they reach for when other people reach for fidget spinners. Like,
Yeah.
it's just natural. Like with music also, like I think like we skip that step sometimes, right?
Okay.
It's just,
We could get to, I guess, when we get to which I imagine we'll get to the art conversation, saying, we could get to that, but just the sort of the bio.
all right.
Just want to continue that.
Yeah, no,
for a
okay,
moment.
keep on going.
So yeah, drawing, yeshiva, collecting. So these things start to signal to me is that I sort of, there's something going on over here, that there's something I'm doing that's unique,
Right.
and every type of person likes it. Meaning that it's not just this cute thing in yeshiva because I'm a tzayim, and then I meet people. I'm constantly starting to, again, as I become more mature and independent in a way, even as a shliach in yeshiva, which I was still very very involved in the world of yeshiva. I was still starting to get a little more curious for art galleries, and I think that's when I read My Name is Asher Lev.
Okay.
And then so just continuing that, still not pursuing or planning or thinking I'm going to be painting, anything like that. I do think that there's a world, a possibility where I can be doing that, but there's no plan. Then after yeshiva, after smich, like after everything,
One second. Why did you start reading My Name is Asher Lev?
Because as I became older and started to notice more things in the world, and I think someone suggested I read it, and as many times is the case when you're in shlichus and you get a little bit more independence, you start to become more curious, or I did at least. So I had access to it, and I started to read it, and I fell I fell in love with it. But the truth is, it was my second year shlichus actually that happened.
No, but my question is, wait, you're reading that book because you felt that you were facing this kind of fork in the roads,
No,
and you needed a book that
no,
spoke to
it was
that.
simply entertainment. Meaning,
Okay.
I heard about this concept and it sounded like it had a lot of resonance with me, and I read a little bit of it and felt, yeah, this is it, and I just went with it all the way and loved it.
But the story doesn't resonate with your story as far as you've told me so far.
I don't think so.
Because My Name is Asher Lev is all about it. The whole premise of the book is that there's a conflict, an inherent conflict between religiosity and art.
A perceived, I think, again, I'm a little structured like that, but I think the idea of the book for me is that there's a perceived inherent conflict, but sort of the Rebbe shows Asher Lev that there isn't, and he could be himself, no matter what the community says, and be completely in pursuit of his avodah, sort of, and that for me was my relationship to Yiddishkeit, the Rebbe, and all that made so much sense. The truth is, in that book, and I'm sure not many people are. Some people will be, and some people not familiar. There is that typical author's narrative at the end where it completely makes him out to be that he ends up completely disconnecting from Yiddishkeit and he separates from the community. So at the end of the book, I didn't like it all. I think it's the last chapter or two.
No, but the whole
story is very.
The whole thing, to be an artist, you have to draw the cross.
Yeah.
You have to draw the crucifixion, and you have to draw nudes. And this goes back to you talking earlier, where like right away he pits the story as, are you being true to your religion or are you being true to your artistic self?
Right.
As if those two are obviously in conflict.
Right.
Skipping over the step of like, this kid's just good at art.
Yeah.
Like, why are you jumping the gun?
Because I do think it's more than that. I do think it's much more than that. I think being an artist is much more than just having a skillful hand.
Okay.
There is a certain creative soul, which, again, I think we could get to, and I would say I would like to express that and maybe we could get to this again more in the biography in Yeshiva, and being a creative person in a Chabad setting, in a natural Chabad Yeshiva life, could be very conflicting. I mean, even if you could draw, just your identity and the way you respond to things could be very, very difficult, and it was at times.
It was.
Yeah, absolutely.
In what way?
I'm still like on a pause in my head but we could jump in and out. So in what way was it conflicting? Is because I think being I think it's not just being skillful. I think it's being creative. That I don't think there's a lot of room for it in the basic, and I don't think this has anything to do with Chabad, Chassidus, but definitely in the functioning of a Lubavitch yeshiva, whether it's an elementary cheder or yeshiva, there's no space, room, encouragement for any form of creativity, definitely in a conventional sense. Mm-hmm. And on the contrary, the bacher who comes in with a nice sweater or something like that is usually the target by fellow bachrim and mashpiyim. And I'm not going on to that rant, but I'm just saying of being looking different and being different in that own little way. So even we're not talking about major trauma or things like that, but there's definitely a sense, a feeling that you're somewhat like sticking out in a certain way. And you feel that, I at least felt that throughout my entire yeshiva experience, which I loved and think was the best part of, most important part of my life so far. You felt
what? You felt that
I felt like my natural disposition was in conflict with the natural disposition of the environment of yeshiva.
Mm-hmm. This week's episode is brought to you by This World is a Garden, a new film and concert production by Yuvla Media. Based on the Rebbe's first talk, Basiligani, the production tells the story of the Chabad vision lasting over 300 years, to see this world as God sees it, as His garden. Combining beautiful cinematography with a live performance of a string quartet, This World is a Garden is a meditation on hope and holding on to a vision as time passes by. This production is now available to be shown at your Chabad house and community. Share the message and vision of Basiligani with your community in a way you never have before. For more information, please visit thisworldisagarden.com. What's interesting to me is that you kind of tied your realization that you're actually an artist with, like, as later on people start responding to it.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you see that before? Before people start, like, before you're 20 years old, did you see yourself as an artist?
I would say as a creative, as an artist, but like as a creative specifically. And that's what I think is very interesting, that, yeah, there is, I think it's true that there's some people are more creative natured people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of beautiful things to it and difficult things to it. But I do think it's true. And I think that was definitely with me throughout my entire life, even before I was even drawing very well or anything like that. I think specifically in clothing, that was always something that was very close to me. Like, even nothing very rogue or whatever, but just even wearing a sweater that had a pattern, or wearing one sweater one day and another sweater another day, was always very shocking to people around. And I remember once going to Zal to be accepted to Zal, and I was a very good bacher and definitely following the rules, even learning and everything like that. And I was getting an interview with a Hanhala member, but I want to get to this later, but I'm going to talk about it now because I don't want to come across or be trying to bash or anything like that. I'm telling you history. I'm not telling you opinions.
Okay.
That this mashpia was on Eastern Parkway, across from 770. And he told me that I'm an amazing bacher and everything, but he doesn't like my pants, that he doesn't like the fit of my pants. So if I could change that, then I could come to the yeshiva. And again, there was not, other than that aspect, I would be sort of, at least externally, a perfect bacher. So I was always very aware of that.
I see.
Of that reality.
I see. So before you're seeing yourself as a professional painter or artist, you already sense that there's an impulse in me that somehow doesn't work within this.
Yeah, like a natural disposition, personality thing that has no place. Not only no place, it's rejected.
Right.
I think now, in many times, it went gone completely to the opposite extreme.
Right. Okay.
Which is, I think, in a way awful, and I'm speaking very extreme language, there's no direction, no values, even in mainstream yeshivas, which is crazy to me, spending Shabbos in Crown Heights, seeing like Bachrim, but in that, which is the opposite extreme, but in that context.
Well, what do you mean? That the yeshivas are to do whatever you want? We can't tell you right, or we can't tell you no?
Yeah. There's no inner value system. It's just about getting by.
Feeling good.
Feeling good. Like, even as an institution, yeshiva is just about being this functional place where Bachrim come in and out and they pay the bills and everything's good and there's not too much turmoil. There's no inner participation.
So that's interesting, because you're describing to me a guy who's in yeshiva, who, like you described yourself earlier, a good bacher in the sense of following the rules, learning.
Say they're on time or early.
You're not making any trouble.
No.
But you even so, a guy like meets you and he comments on your pants.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know how hot-headed you were as a bacher, but even if you're not so hot-headed, as an adult also, but certainly as an adolescent, it pisses you off. Like, get lost. Yeah. Get lost. I'm not doing anything wrong here. Why did you stick it out?
That's a very good question. And just to heighten the question, I'm saying there's more than that. There's also, thick glasses weren't a thing, but I got everything comes to the frum world about 2-3 years later. Right. In terms, I remember Crocs even. Right. In God Yisrael, New York, we had Crocs in 2002, 2003, was making fun of us that we have holes in our shoes. 2 years later, every kid in camp has Crocs. And same thing with thick glasses. Uh-huh. Everybody thought they're the biggest klippah. 2 years later, every mashpia is wearing thick glasses. So, and then I had thick glasses. That was the talk of town. Uh-huh. Again, I'm overstating it, but I think the point that it makes some form of impression of feeling like an outsider, meaning
Right.
feeling a sense of differentiation, of tension
Right.
in a very natural way, was felt. And I remember times like being pulling off my glasses in the middle of a Farbrengen.
Really?
And my
They're
brother,
trying to be
Mikhail,
Makar.
yeah. I remember my brother also. He had the glasses and a small brim hat. The Mashpia took away his hat.
Is your older brother?
Yeah, all right.
I think
So it was then, I don't know if I'd be happy if I'm talking about this, but I remember I was Yud Shvat, I think it was at the oil, and he was sitting near Mashpia. The Mashpia took away his glasses and his hat. Couldn't farbring with someone wearing.
It was bothering him.
It was bothering him.
And his hat.
Yeah.
What was wrong with his hat?
It was a small brim, which again now is standard. But this was
Right,
a
well,
year before it became standard.
I know I'm not letting you go linear, but I'm
Yeah.
also surprised that you want it to be linear given your art.
Yeah.
We're all over the place. Think of it as think of it as
Studio session.
No, think of it as like modern art. We're gonna
Yeah.
dance around, unless you definitely want to go linear. Sometimes I just can't help myself but ask, like, so the mashpiyim are picking on you and your brother about your glasses and your hat.
Yeah, me specifically. I'm just bringing that story as a historical anecdote.
Okay, what do your parents think about all this? Like, my guess is they're the ones that paid for these glasses, or in Canada, maybe the government did, but they allowed
So that they paid for it and they supported it and everything like that. But I don't want to go there just yet.
Okay. Fair.
But yeah, you asked a good question before that I'm stuck on now because I become very stuck on questions about how did I survive, sort of, and I do think in a way it's a miracle, especially with, which I think I'm very proud of, is my continued pursuit of Chassidus, Limud Torah, and Avodas Hashem in a very real and personal way, meaning to say that I didn't just survive, I actually loved Yeshiva. And at a certain point, I was able to separate the two and take it. If a mashpia felt like he had to go off, that was his problem. I was able to very much separate the individual and the religion, sort of, the personalities.
Wow.
That was, and it's still my greatest pursuit, almost with all things. And it can become a negative, meaning because you become a little bit disconnected, you disassociate with yourself with a lot of the culture of Chassidus, of Lubavitch, and of religion and yeshiva life. So you can become a little bit cold to any form of events that happen that are not directly related to the religion or Chassidus or things like that. So that's the negative side effect to it, which I don't know how negative it is. But specifically, I think what happened is that it was a miracle that there was a few mashpiyim and teachers that really either looked after me, I connected with, and they were just my everything. I think, say, out of maybe 25 teachers, maybe even more, that I've had from Cheder through Yeshiva, there's three that I would consider three or four that I would consider actual teachers. And those, for me, were the guiding forces that led me through and continue to.
Do you want to give any of them
a shout out?
Yeah,
a name?
Their flowers.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's nice to sometimes talk,
positively. Yeah. So I think I'll go just in historical order. So the first was Rabbi Schneur Kessler New Haven.
Okay.
Which maybe you should have on. I think he's great.
I've asked him a number of times.
Okay. So he was one.
Right, but this was when he was still teaching in the Yeshiva, not the
Yeah,
Kreidel.
he was Shir Gimel Mesifta.
Right.
Number 2 was Nachum Bucket in Baltimore.
Yeah, nice guy.
And number 3, I think it would be Feitel Levin from. I did smicha with him
in Australia
online, so it was a little bit of a funny situation. But I'll tell you what each of them taught me specifically. Sure. Again, I don't know if they would want this to represent them, but I'll tell you what they did for me.
Right.
And I'll try to be a little bit vague and not try to quote them or speak for them. But what they did for me is, Rabbi Kessler sort of helped me understand like the relationship to Rebbe and Chassidus as a whole, and in a way.
He was your mashpir, your Maggid?
He was a Maggid Shir, but he used to bring with us a lot and hang out with us. And he really, I think till now, his greatest push for what I see at least, the idea of the Rebbe and Chassidus as being not this, which I'm sure some may criticize, like this Kabbalah's all thing that you go to Lubavitch Yeshiva, so you have to do these things, but there's actual meaning it has to you, and it could contribute to your life as a person and help guide your life, and you don't just have to, not checklist. That's, I think, something he imparted on me then, but then after I continued my relationship with him, and then Nachum Bucket would be very similar in a way, but I think in a way heightening the sense of avoda as being a necessary part of life, and the idea that the idea of avoda being a necessary part of life and the only way sort of to survive and grow and be involved in.
By avoda, you mean what?
I mean, one would be davening, also, but in general, just the subject of being grub as not being a insult but a fact, and being decent is the fact that if a person's a grubyak, they won't be able to appreciate chossidus or davening and things like that as a natural consequence of being a grubyak. So it's very. I think
I want to pause for a second. I think that's a fascinating insight. The idea of it not being a insult but a fact.
Yeah.
It's in other words, it kind of takes not the edge off, but it takes the bias off and the neggle off.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a virtue signaling. It's not a virtue signal where you basically you're in, you're out.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. You're an outcast.
Yeah.
But it's if you don't have an ear for music, you can't sing. It's not an insult.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's a scientific fact almost in Chassidus language.
Right.
More,
it's not about me and you, me versus you. It's an understanding that there's things in life that need a certain skill set or appreciation.
So that, and then I think Rabbi Treitel Levin taught me what halacha is. That halacha, and all these things, I think what comes out is the realization that it's not just a emunah, not that chas v'shalom you don't need emunah, but that you're learning Torah, hiskashrus, let's call it, a relationship with the Rebbe and Hasidic identity as Lubavitch. These are things are not on the checklist. They're not things you do out of a sense of responsibility, but a sense of need and a sense of, in a way, rational conclusion that if you want to go from point A to point B in your life, these are the tools you need to have. That goes from the Rebbe, that goes to learning Chassidus, that goes to Sur Meirav Aseh Tov in a very practical way. The same thing with eating. Like I'm saying, like that concept, again, this is it's just the easiest example to express this idea. Like if a person is obsessed with food, that just in a way, and I'm not saying that's something that I like to just use as a classic example, then you will not be able to appreciate elikus as well, because your obsession, your focus in life is looking downwards. Right? The famous difference between animal and a human is the human's natural position, its physical position is to see the Shemayim, or an animal's position is to see the land. So that's simply what it means to be megushim. Right. It's not an insult. It's not a take away your glasses or anything. It's the inability to appreciate the heaven, so to say. Again, these are my words on my understanding of this journey. Yeah. And then going to 5-11 is the structure of halacha, like how he was able to, like from like a pasuk, whatever, completely create a perfect formula in which halacha, the way we know it, comes about, and the whole system of halacha, that's also not hocus pocus. You get a heter from a rav but that there's an actual structure and rational system that our life runs on. Yeah. So these three people for me, sometimes in an active way, meaning I could go to them and complain. Could go to them and complain and be hurt and whatever and be understood. But even in a passive way, seeing that whatever else I'm seeing, I can dismiss in a certain way. I don't need to think that represents the totality of being a Lubavitcher.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I've heard of them. I've heard good things about them. So I'm not speaking to them because I never met them myself. But the idea that you're sharing here is, to me, a very powerful idea, which is that, at least in your case, right? So we don't need to project further and further and make. But I think there is a lot to be learned from it. Is there something very powerful about sharing? The common denominator between all of them, like you're describing, is an understanding that what I'm teaching is much larger than me and you,
Yeah.
and it will survive me and you.
Yeah.
This isn't about, like you said, the mashpia who couldn't verbring with the glasses staring with the bacher staring through these modern glasses. What if what I'm talking about is big, why do I even notice the glasses? Like,
Yeah.
and even if I notice them, like, I'm not scared of them.
Yeah.
Nothing's gonna happen to these ideas, right? And these truths because someone's wearing funky glasses. It's just
Yeah.
not right. And you say, well, the davar pashit. It's not such a davar pashit because if we want to be fair, at the end of the day, an educator is also a human being,
Yeah.
right? An educator has made a choice to live their life teaching this thing. They have to take both what they're teaching seriously and also their role seriously.
Yeah.
I understand that, like, and it's sometimes hard to separate like your role from what you're teaching,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I think this idea of like, because when whenever you're talking to someone younger than you or someone different than you, you're automatically kind of on the defensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where like, what's going to happen when I'm not here, and this guy is running his own life, or this guy is out on his own, or this guy's in charge, let's say, right? And what is because it's different, because it's unknown, there's this fear factor, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously as you go bigger, like not just individual to individual but generation to generation, that fear becomes even larger. Like, you look at the younger generation and look at the pants that they're wearing and look at the skirts that they're wearing and look, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? These people are, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all, it gets scary, scary, scary. And at the end of the day, the only answer that I've ever heard that makes any sense is along the lines of what you're describing, which is what we're talking about here is much larger than any of us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're talking about Rebbeim, you're talking about chossid, you're talking about halacha, you're talking about avodas Hashem. These things are way bigger than any of this. Do you really think it's contained in the specific framework that you have figured out?
Yeah.
Right?
So no, it's an interesting thing, and I think for a while, especially as I explored more of the world of halacha quite intensely, and still do somewhat, I became a little bit obsessed for a time, not anymore, that the only answer in a certain way, meaning to say, this is what my conclusion was and somewhat is that in order to demand a certain value from someone, meaning in order to I want to use the word like legislate something towards someone, you need to have a source for it, which the world became a little bit obsessed with now. Like, what's your mucker? Where are you getting that from?
Right.
So I sort of went down that track, that there needs to be a basis for everything. And what I've learned is that almost anything we do in Yiddishkeit, even if as chassidim we look at it in more of the soid level in the drush, any nuance in Yiddishkeit is founded in halacha.
Right.
So it could be yesh machmirim, yesh neg, and things like that. But almost any form of nuance in Judaism that goes beyond the basic definition of the 613 mitzvahs are based in halacha. So for me, that became almost the guiding force, is that if it's not in halacha, sort of, or not, let's say, a takana of the Rebbe, and I wrote this whole thing down, or if it's not a takana of the Rebbe, then it really doesn't matter what they say, so to say.
Well, when did you write this down? When you were
I
a
wrote this down after. I wrote this down when I was an Alter Bacher.
but not yet married.
No.
Okay, so we have to get back to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that became, so like that point, but I think now, in a very beautiful and positive way, now I've become much more in tune with and in pursuit of also the virtue, the goodness of not just the limit of Chassidus in terms of perspective, but the minhagim of Chassidim and the lifestyle of Chassidim, and how it too is a way to get to point A to point B in someone's avodas Hashem, or thank God in raising a family.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the earliest Sfarim that the Rebbe worked on or commissioned was Sefer Menagim. I think Rabbi
Right.
Groner was asked to do that. I don't know the full history. but I think that was the first time that minhagim were codified.
Right.
And I think some people look at it, like, okay, so now another list of rules.
Yeah.
And, Lubavitch is becoming more rule based, and I don't think it has to be seen that way. I don't know that it's wrong to say that that's what it is, but I don't think it has to be seen that way. I think it's like what you're saying. There's a way of life that there's a way of life that has certain things that are real and certain things that are kind of added onto it, and it's good to know what's what. It's good to know what's what, and it's not so much about making everybody follow the rules, but as much as it's giving people an understanding of what this path is.
Yeah, but I do think, and that's so I've even come to appreciate sometimes, to sort of encourage and pursue and demand even Lubavitch minhagim, but there needs to be some form of context basis,
Right.
For it.
Right.
So there's a book that came out now. It's probably like there's a Rebbe's directive, sort of. It's like 1,000 pages of like one-liners that the Rebbe once told someone.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
So right. So that's what I feel too. So, but if the Rebbe commissioned Sefer Minhagim,
Right.
as you sort of described, then that would be a perfect example
Right.
of understanding that I don't know if this is the correct example, that Chabad doesn't use black pepper on Pesach. I don't know if that's in Sefer Minhagim, but there's certain things that are not in the Alter B'Shulchan Aruch,
Right.
but will be found, and I think that's a perfect example of, yes, there is no rational halachic description or ruling on this, but this is how Chassidim
Right.
did, as is described in Sefer
Right.
HaMinhagim.
And it's still only a minig. It's not halacha.
No, but I do think if someone wants to live a Lubavitch life, that's what they should be doing.
Right. Right. No, I'm saying it's good to know what's what.
Yes, yes.
Like this idea that if you untangle this kind of spool of mixed up yarn with all different colors, if you untangle it, somehow the thing's going to fall apart. To me, it's like, I don't understand. Like, do you trust these things are real or not?
No, absolutely.
If they're real, then you can untangle it all.
Yeah.
And learn, this is halacha, this is minig, this is God knows what.
Yeah.
Right. This is hearsay, and you, if you want to do it, gesundheit, but know what's what.
Yeah.
Know what's what, and so what's the point? The point is that until you know what's what, then it's all about just following along, right? But the second that there's a question, if you don't know what's what, you don't have the tools to get to an answer.
Yeah.
And that's when things fall apart.
Yeah.
Right. And so what you've been describing about the chinuch, and the point is not that this is what chinuch has to be, or that this is what their ideas meant to everyone in the class, but in your story, there's a powerful example of, someone who could have easily been pushed away by negativity, and a sense of, this isn't my place, unbelonging, whatever the opposite of belonging is, right? And instead, these people showed you that there's room for you too. The reason there's room for you is because the space is so freaking large. Of course, there's room for you, right? And it belongs to you as well. Make of it as you can and as you wish, knowing what you know.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So I know I've kind of
I remember
I know I've taken you around in circles. I apologize for that. Maybe it's just the morning, but you've been describing this kind of opening awareness as you're finishing off the kind of system of yeshiva, that like, okay, maybe I am an artist, maybe I should take this seriously. Now you're an Elter Bacher, you're kind of floating in whatever you want to call 770 at that time. That space.
Yeah.
So describe that.
What a crazy space. So first of all, I'm proud to say.
So talk about heads without legs, right?
Yeah. But I want to stress this, if any Bachrim are listening, or parents of Bachrim, and this is a perfect example of what I was talking about before of Bachrim these days, sort of. And I'm not much older than Bachrim these days. Is that I didn't have any social media until I was finished the smicha year, so to say.
Right. Because it didn't exist, really.
No, it 100% did exist.
Exist.
Many of my friends did, and things like that. My point is that idea of having a personality and being completely invested in Bacher life and yeshiva life, which I think is the greatest gift to a child, even though it is hard and there does need to be a lot of adjustments and things like that, but it is essential Like, those Marines and things like that, they're 65 years old and they still have certain skills. They still have a certain sense of identity and confidence in themselves and their abilities because 50 years ago they achieved something. I do think being fully participating in yeshiva life for those short 6 years with no smartphone and no social media is essential to be able to grow and be involved in that life. And I did not have any social media until I was after sort of the system in shidduchim maybe, and then I opened the social media. It's called Mendel Treitel Art, and I started posting my drawings from Yeshiva for the past 6 years.
So, 1 second. So it was a conscious choice not to have social media as a bacher?
It wasn't even a thing.
It wasn't a thought?
It wasn't a thought.
Because you were busy in yeshiva.
Yeah.
You hadn't decided I'm going to
Yeah.
wait till later. It's like you okay.
There was no space for it.
So you're saying what your comment now is more in retrospect.
Yeah, in retrospect and in encouragement and highlighting the fact,
Right.
and in a way also trying to continuously
Right.
go between the sense of chassidish intensity in full throttle,
Right.
and at the same time to recognize within that, yes, there can be problems, but that doesn't mean that the values and the concepts itself are flawed.
Right.
And that's what I really want to overemphasize.
Right.
Because that's how I live my life, basically, overemphasizing that point.
Right.
So I open in social media, I post my drawings, and people are very excited by it. It could be just my cousins, people from shul, from the Chabad house, and things like that.
You're living in Montreal at this point?
So this point, actually, I finished in LA for 2 years. I did 2 years.
I was also in LA.
I was in Mesivta.
I was in Zal.
And then I was there for 2 years, and then I was in my note for 3 months in the summer, and then I was sort of starting shidduchim after Tishrei, and I think was in my note at the end. That's when I sort of started to create my own path, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I opened social media and started posting these drawings, and people just found them very fascinating, and they didn't expect to see that from me, and that fueled me to continue to try new things, and people commented, and it just became like a thing that I did in the evenings or whatever, and people really liked it, and I just sort of kept going. And sort of you asked, going back to the question is how does somebody become so involved as an artist as I am currently? It sort of evolved with these social media, being encouraged to do it, and I spoke to someone who told me about this artist that my art looks like, and I checked out that artist, and I started to get what you're using and pursuing that. But it was all...
So you never went to art school?
No, I did not. I went to a place in Manhattan for like a month, not a university, but it had like art classes. It's called the New York School of Arts. But I found, and I continue to find, that if I trial and error and learning and trying to figure it out myself is more enjoyable, and I would be able to learn in a way more quickly.
So to this point, your art is completely organic in that sense.
Yeah, completely.
I mean, obviously you're learning online and seeing other people what they do and so on. But have you ever had did you ever at that point have like a mentor outside?
So I did.
Going back to the story of Usher Lev, did you have like a?
So I went to
mentor?
So to what's his name, Michal Muchnik.
But
I was in his. Are you saying non-Lubavitcher?
Yeah.
Not really.
So
just follow a lot of people on social media.
So talk about Michal Muchnik. He's a good guy.
Yeah. So I was his apprentice or whatever for like 2 months, just hanging out with him in the studios in the afternoon, asking him questions.
He was already doing the mosaics probably at that point, right?
Yeah.
Because you used to paint more, I think.
Yeah. No. So he was doing. So I was helping him with certain things like filling in, like being an assistant in a way.
Right.
So that was all part of that evolution, sort of seeing that I don't just draw, but being an artist is something that's a part of me, and it is something that I really want to pursue.
But his art, even though I think his paintings back in the day are a lot more fantastical and but they're still very Jewish.
Yeah.
You never felt that you had to go down that route of like, if I want to be a Chassidic artist, I have to paint, disassociated heads with Streimlach or whatever.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Meaning there was times when I had a foot in that Judaic market, but that was simply because I made a piece that was Judaic and people liked it very much, and that sold well, but I never placed myself in, excuse me, in a Hasidic Judaic art world or art market. And I think it goes back to this conversation that we're having, is that I never felt a sense, once I had this discovery, the sense that being a chossid and pursuing my art, that sort of aesthetic, which I think we need to elaborate on, that aesthetic, imaginary expectation of what it means, really existed. So for me, being an artist was just being an artist, like being an artist. So like I didn't have that expectation for myself to place myself in a certain place in the community, because I didn't look, and I don't look at values as being these communal expectations. But I do think it's unfair, for the sake of this conversation, to sort of so strongly assume that needs to be, that we need to assume that to be an artist, you need to be a rabbi artist, so to say. Meaning, why is that? I understand it in terms of the culture, and
I'm not talking about anybody else. We're talking in your story. I'm not.
So my point is, I don't even see the question, and you sent it to me, and I was really thinking about it, and I don't. Meaning, I understand it in terms of like totally the street, so to say, but in terms of a value, a way of life, I don't see any reality where being an artist needs to be in the context of being a Judaic artist, so painting menorahs or something like that.
But you said a line earlier, and I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying the reason that you didn't feel that way is because you didn't feel that you needed to fit in that way.
Yeah.
Like, to be a Chassidish Yid, you don't need to paint Chassidim necessarily.
Yeah.
Right, and that goes back to what we were talking earlier. That question of conformity, which really is more a question of kind of like narrowing and keeping everything within a certain line. If you don't, if your guidelines are halacha and larger ideas of halacha and avodas Hashem, and I don't know what else you were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you can ask yourself a question: is there anything in my paintings that goes against those guidelines? And if the answer is no, I don't need to paint Kriyas Yam Suf or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, meaning if someone's in real estate and they're building a building, they're not making the building look like the luchas.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Or the menorah.
Yeah. No. I actually had that very thought when I was thinking about the conversation we're going to have. I was like, why is it that when it comes to making money, that the understanding, of course, is to be a businessman is that you give tzedakah afterwards, is that you don't get overly obsessed with it, which, you don't get overly obsessed with it. You keep your priorities in check. The Fili Kabir used to speak about this at length. It's very interesting how it's such a focus in like the few years of his Mamarim, to be honest in your business dealings in Mamarim, not in letters, in these high Chassidic discourses, like Basiligani.
Yeah.
But Kvisitim L'Torah, and not screwing people over.
Yeah.
Like Basiligani up here. That's what it's about, right? But in business, it's kind of like, you could sell socks, you could sell lingerie, you could sell whatever you want as long as it's kosher.
Yeah.
And then with art, suddenly we get very, very like particular and almost like nervous about it. Why do you think that is?
So it's a good question, because at the end of the day, and this is what I was saying before about art being a creative person versus being just a craft. So it's a little bit, in a way, unfair to completely compare the two to regular business, because at the end of the day, and I do believe it, and I would say that I think the Rebbe sort of believed in Rebbeim in general, which I don't want to be a scholar in the Rebbe's opinion in art, that art is still a expression, meaning it is a voice inside the person,
right?
That is coming out for everybody to see, a certain element of that. So the expectation is that your only expression should be Judaica. The truth is, I don't actually know, but I do think that's somewhat I would imagine that our minds go there, something of that nature.
it was interesting because a few months ago, a friend of mine, David Margolin, put out an article on Chabad.org about the Rebbe and art,
Yeah.
and he spoke about Baruch Nachshon, and who I had the honor of meeting in his house and his gallery. I don't know if you ever
Yeah.
went to
Yeah.
his gallery was his living room, bedroom,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
like a very, very special guy. And I think he also wrote about Handel Lieberman, and probably also Zalman Kleiman.
Yeah.
Those are usually the three people that are spoken
Yeah.
about. You know,
But there are others.
of course, but without. I
Yeah.
think that's what the article is about because I think the Rebbe's interactions with them were more robust. Let's say.
No, there are others.
Okay, so you'll elaborate, but what I found striking about it is like you're taking the idea, the idea of the Rebbe encouraging this Jewish art and pushing them to make art that they wouldn't have made otherwise. But where do we go from here? Like all these people are gone. Like we're past these people.
Mhm.
Like the art. Art is always pushing the boundaries and pushing ahead and expressing new ideas. If we are now going to just kind of keep on expressing those same ideas, we've lost something.
More than that, they're their ideas.
Right.
We're copying their ideas.
Right. And so it's like yeah. So in many ways it becomes a kind of snapshot of a larger question of, the Rebbe had these ideas and these guidelines and this vision of Jewish art, but he's not here anymore. He's not going to tell you about your art
Right.
specifically,
Right.
right? So are you going to basically come back to the safe zone of just painting like those people using their permission slip that they have? Or are you going to say, here are the ideas that I see being articulated, like the guidelines and the ideas and the vision, the general framework that's articulated. Now I'm going to see how I fit into this one way or another.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's I think ultimately that becomes a fundamental question of our time.
Yeah, it does. I'm saying there is a concept in the art world of sort of art representing the time that art is, and again, you find that. And I do think it's an interesting point, even parenthetically, is that when modern art was becoming a thing in America and the rest of the world, it was a big tumult. It was a big tumult that we're starting to see the world, that our times is starting to look at the world not in a literal way.
Right, postmodern.
Yeah. So my point is that art should represent, in its natural meaning,
Right.
Represent something of the times that it's being made,
Right.
versus simply depicting another painting or another time. So, and I do think, especially in some of my current stuff, there is a very, very personal and deep relationship with the times or myself or things that I do try to depict. Meaning to say is that there's still a inner personal deep journey with the art, meaning that there is something there. There's something there that's beyond just depicting a moment in time in a very well way that can be something to read into. So maybe therefore the sticking to those versions of art is safe. Maybe that's all people know how to do. Yeah. So I'm not. Yeah.
Look, the question ultimately becomes very straightforward. The way you're describing it, that Lubavitch painting art today is painting art is painting in a time post Gimel Tammuz.
Yeah.
Right. What does that art look like?
Right.
What does that art look like?
Right.
Is it going to be honest to the questions that you have today?
Yeah.
Or is it going to make believe like we could paint like we did 40 years ago?
Right.
And that's obviously not just a question about art, that's a question about life. But art is supposed to be a representation of life, right? And the artist is supposed to be the person who asks questions in a way that gets people thinking, in a way that only an artist can.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I do think that those chassidim, very beautifully did represent their time that they were in.
Right.
And even the struggles. Zalman Kleiman has those paintings of like Gehenim and things like that, meaning even their fears and their terror was depicted, but it was depicted in their visualization and in the way they saw the world. Like the chassidim then, which probably should be the case now, had zero haircuts with payas on the side, and even, and I'll say this is that I'll give another two shout outs is my grandparents' house. They have a lot of Zalman Kleiman paintings. I believe my uncle Arik, who to me represents in a very wild way a patron of the arts, lishma, meaning for the art itself. And he bought paintings before these things were popular. Pasha just
straight from Zalman.
Yeah, I don't know the exact history, so straight from him or from Mendel or from other artists. And he still has in his house all these items of art that represent a certain reality of whoever made them.
Right. Yeah, I mean Mendel Lieberman's his shlichus painting.
Yeah.
That's a
I personally I'm a bigger fan of Mendel than Zalman. I think
he's my great uncle, so I like
okay.
It. So good for you.
No, I think his stuff is incredible, and even his chassidim, like you feel like you're in the whatever. I feel like his stuff is amazing.
Well, he went through. I think his paintings convey
exactly
a certain sadness and tragedy that he lived through.
Exactly, and also so
his people are all very.
But there's a certain gaguim, meaning there's a certain sense of hope and focus of the moment. Like he has like the learning of Samach Vav.
I never saw that.
He has a few, and learning chassidus, all these paintings, which some of them I've been inspiration for me.
Really?
Yes.
So you see Mendel as an inspiration for you?
Yeah, I don't really read so much of thing, but like his imaging. And that for me, it's my point. He's representing his times. He has his individual voice. And what happens now is, again, we're assuming these things.
Sure.
We're assuming that this is the way the classic Lubavitch artist would go, is to then depict those paintings again, because those were the ones that were sort of accepted.
Right.
And I think the argument that's being made now is the conversation is why not sort of depict Lubavitch now?
Right.
Or meaning at least the Lubavitcher, the individual artist who identifies as a Lubavitcher now.
I mean, Mendel Lieberman, everybody knows this at this point, was in and out of Lubavitch for many years. Yeah. Right, especially when he was younger.
Yeah, so Salvador Dali was a famous artist with a big mustache. Let's say Mendel in Paris.
Oh yeah,
had a big gingy mustache.
Oh, he's trying to imitate him,
like Salvador Dali.
Okay,
that's what I heard.
It's fascinating, but he was in and out. It was touch and go.
Yeah. So he's another person who really represents a lot for me.
Right. Oh, you're saying his life story as
I don't
well.
know. I don't know the details of it, but the concept.
He's my great uncle.
Okay.
And I can't get to the bottom of it. Like
right.
people, I think it's out of respect.
Right.
He also didn't have kids.
Right.
Well, he actually had kids who were killed in the war.
Right.
And so, but he doesn't have any heirs or descendants living. So I think people feel like it's not for them to talk about.
Right.
But everybody does know that he was in and out, right? And he struggled with what you're describing, I imagine, which is I'm an artist. I love to draw. I love to paint. I don't know how it started exactly.
I'm saying it's more than that. The one thing I want to emphasize is that it is more than that. It is, meaning it's a person in the context of.
Is saying his expression, his what do you call it, disposition?
His disposition, his way, his natural way of living.
I mean, really, even later on in life, when he was by the Rebbe's Farbringen and then you see him conducting,
exactly.
Does that look to you like a regular guy? I mean, who else did it? Zosha Volmovsky. I mean, he was also a colorful character. Maybe he didn't paint, but he had his own kind of way. Yeah, I mean, I think artists.
1 second, but Zosha, I don't think he did like an orchestra.
No.
He was more like a chossid.
No, right.
Whereas Mendel is literally like he's in an orchestra in Paris and some symphony.
Yeah, and it always feels a little bit offbeat, but whatever, I don't know.
But no, I think that's it. That's not adorable. For me at least, and some people will. In Montreal, the amount of kids in my class who grandfathers and still are professor this, professor that in universities, and they have beards and their chakras at 6:30 in the morning. And there's all these different professors. For me, at least, and I'm becoming more aware of it, this idea of being an individual person who has a life and a personality, a private way that they live, and being part of the Lubavitch community, it seems to me at least that to the Rebbe wasn't even a topic of conversation. So a person so like Mendel Lieberman doing that by the Farbrengen, again, these are my words and my way of saying it. It wasn't. There was nothing to it.
Right.
Meaning, on the contrary, it was just a beautiful thing. It wasn't for meaning for the person viewing it and seeing that this person sticks out of the crowd. That's your problem.
Yeah, no. I didn't mean that he was. I just meant he was offbeat the music, not offbeat the people. But yeah, look, I dig it. I love it. I love it. I love it, and absolutely, I think this question of individualism in many ways is the kind of core thesis of this podcast.
Yeah.
Which was, my argument has been for a long time that we have crushed individualism, or we at least
Who's we?
As a community. As a community, I don't know where it started and who started it. I'm not looking to point fingers. I could say names, but I think it's much larger than any individual. I think it's more interesting to see it like, how did it happen? It's much larger than individuals. People want to blame this guy, that guy. It's societal. It's a lot of fear. It's a lot of things, and I don't mean to rehash my whole theory now, but I think that we've come to a place where individuality has been submerged. And just to go to that point about, you said that the grandfathers with the doctors before them, people have asked me like
they weren't like professors of random
Dr.
things.
Brower, you're probably talking about,
Professor Teitelbaum. I don't even know who he is. Professor
right.
Professor Cohen.
Right. So a lot of people ask me at the beginning, like, okay, so you're probably going to interview a lot of Baal Teshuvas. And I said, look, I've first of all, I don't really see that line as like Baal Teshuva is not Baal Teshuva. Is like, I don't, that category to me at this point for sure is kind of blurred. But in a way, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's what we always do, because we assume that all the individuality is on the other side. Yeah. Right. So like the Baal Teshuvas have interesting stories, because once upon a time, this guy had long hair and he wore colored shirts, and he has a whole backstory that's fascinating. And then once he comes in, whatever, he becomes one of us and it's all good. It's like, no. My theory is that everybody inside, whether they started off frum or start off as a Baal Teshuva, there's plenty of individuality here that we're not talking about, we're not thinking about, because it's all been kind of submerged under the Rebbe. Like there's the Rebbe, and then there's everybody else, and then that's it. End of story. And all we need to do is know more and more Rebbe stories. And it's like, no, there's individuals. And like you're pointing out, when you look at the art of Mendel Lieberman, and the art of Zalman Klein, and the art of Zalman Kleinman, and the art of Baruch Nachshon, and the other people that you said weren't mentioned, even though they were painting more obviously Jewish art than what, let's say, you're doing right now, you can see very quickly which one is Zalman Kleinman, which one's Mendel Lieberman, and which one's Baruch Nachshon. They're coming through, right? There's a person there who's expressing a perspective. My grandfather told me also about Zalman Kleinman. He was with him in Brunoise as a boy. They were, on the way out of the war. And he said that they were Farbrengen, I forget if he said it was Reb Nissen, I don't think it was Reb Nissen. The mashpia was Farbrengen, and the young boys, and after an hour or whatever that he was talking, they all turned around, and Zalman Kleinman had painted a whole sketch on the wall. Yeah. Like it was part of who he was.
And he could probably, by the way, repeat the whole Farbrengen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if anybody could, but yeah, I'm saying he wasn't.
But my point is, he wasn't, I would imagine, that he wasn't doing it as an outsider.
No, he was painting the Farbrengen. Yeah. He was painting the Farbrengen.
That was his participation in the Farbrengen.
Right. Could be. Yeah, it makes sense, right? I'm saying that these people were expressing something about themselves that in their capacity and their disposition, like you described, comes out through art, right? But what they're expressing is really what's true about every person. They just know how to do it with paint, right? They're expressing individuality, and individuality, for whatever reason, has been subsumed, has been subsumed, and like you said, you as you get older, you begin to pick up. Wait a second, there's this person, there's that person, there's this other person. There are different kinds of people. There are different kinds of individuals. There are different kinds of chassidim, right? Like I think I maybe said before, like chassidim is lashon rabbim,
Yeah.
right? And for some reason, there's this notion that if you shrink everybody into this kind of singular path, somehow it's better.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
No. So what you're saying is true, and it's definitely a sentiment that everybody has. But Baruch Hashem, I'm at the point where I think that's not a truth. Meaning to say is that maybe that was even my experience, but I've become so disconnected with looking that as being a relevant ingredient in Lubavitch identity, that to hear that seems almost untrue.
Right.
Not in an experience, not in your experience, and not even in my experience throughout yeshiva, but in my relationship with being a chossid.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Is
Yeah.
that those people in that environment that does that, and unfortunately does do that, for me, I'm at a point again, and I think there's a sense, could be too far, where those people in that environment has nothing to do with, it's their own midas rois, so to say. That has nothing to do with Lubavitch, the Rebbe, me, the Eibishter, anything like that. That
Right.
just happens to be people. Could be there, a lot of them, but that doesn't represent for me my community, my family, my life,
Right.
my person. Which
Well, I think you have to do a lot of untangling to get there, because many people would argue that it does come from the Rebbe, right? And I think that in itself becomes a question that people have to figure out for themselves, right? Because very often a version of the Rebbe can be forced on you too, right? Like
that's on the enforcer,
right? No, I understand, but it's not so simple as to separate the Rebbe from the people making a baligan, because a lot of people are taught that this does come from the Rebbe, right? And the Rebbe was only makar of individuals who were bali tshuva, because they were kind of pre-existing, what's it called, grandfathered in as artists. But if you want to become an artist as a Lubavitcher, God forbid, go be a shliach, right? I think it comes back to that insight that you discussed earlier, which is, when you realize that this is larger than you and the other person, much larger than you and the other person, a lot of this kind of language becomes nonsensical. It's like, well, you're going to decide the pants that you're wearing is appropriate, but not my pants. Your pants was wrong 20 years ago, right? Like this is getting ridiculous. And it's so much bigger. It's bigger than 20 years. It's bigger than 100 years. God willing, it's bigger than 1,000 years. And if that's the case, then what we're talking about here is irrelevant nonsense. Right? The only thing that's going to last is what's true. Not the color of your glasses.
No, that's definitely it. But there was something a moment ago that you were saying that really stuck out in that subject of individuality versus the voices that people sort of dismiss. And I'm failing to find it, to remember it.
Interrupt me next time.
Yeah, that's what I have to do. But no, that's really it. And I do think, again, I think it's an important point, because I think it's really an encouraging thing, and something I've noticed. I think of some of your guests, like there's the category of like a classic Chabad lineup involved there,
right?
And then there's just random individuals who are living a life that I think you can perceive as being very focused and they're very present in the pursuit of their Yiddishkeit, Chassidishkeit, but it doesn't look like what a person would expect a Chassidish life to look like.
Right.
And I think that's true, and I think that's really in a way, at least generally, the only way forward. And I think one of your first guests, Shmuley Hecht, said something which I found very cool, which is decentralized.
Right.
Lubavitch, which is dangerous to it, and it needs to be described in nuance. But I do think every person needs to have that empowerment, that this is and this is my God, right?
Right.
Zekeli, and it's my journey, my Eibishter, and all the noise around it is in a way irrelevant. So again, there needs to be. That doesn't mean I can do whatever I want. There needs to be. You need to have guidelines and mashpiyim and personal mashpiyim and rabbanim and things like that. But the pursuit of the individual should never be guided by the voices that are implanted in their head by their sort of external surroundings. And I think that is, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't survive. If I wasn't able to come to that realization,
Right.
then there would be no place for me, sort of.
Right. Yeah, the anchor has to be somewhere that transcends. In a way, it has to be in a place that transcends you also.
Yeah.
Because like you are not going to be the same person in a day from now, certainly not a year from now. Do you want your whole Yiddishkeit to be based on the version of you right now that can't survive, right, and can't endure whatever you're going to do, good and bad, over the next year? Of course not, right? This kind of fixation on a fixed point,
an aesthetic almost.
What?
An aesthetic, that there's a certain visualization,
right.
And if you don't have that, then
it's like you said, like it used to be big brims,
exactly.
But now it's small brims,
Yeah.
And when people start, for whatever odd reason, figuring that the fashion is to have big brims, they're going to be ostracized again. This is getting ridiculous, right? But it's to me it's a symptom. To me, it's a symptom. It's a symptom of fear. It's a symptom of uncertainty, deep uncertainty, and ultimately, none of us are going to be immune from fear. It's as you get older, in a way, you realize that you understand why people were once afraid of you, but now you're afraid of the people coming after you, your kids. You don't know what's going to happen. And the idea is not like you said that the problem can go in the other extreme where you're like, okay, I'm not an opinion anymore. Do whatever the hell you want. I'll just sit back. Well, then that's just an abdication, right? But the appropriate response. I was thinking about it like this, actually. Like there's a lot of today when it comes to like tznius and modesty. So you have like, on one hand, you have this extreme where like we can't put girls in any magazines, even tznius, even younger, because like we have to protect this castle at any cost, right? Like you give an inch, they're gonna take a foot. Let's wait for it to pass. You can't even let an image be printed of a girl in a magazine, right? On the other hand, you'll have people arguing that like I once had someone non-Orthodox sitting with me at Shabbos, and he's like, you have to let boys and girls study together, because if they don't, they're not going to know how to react to one another when they get older, right? And there's two
different extremes,
and there's validity to both of them, right? One will argue that if I even heard this, by the way, from a Rosh Yeshiva, Litvish Rosh Yeshiva, who's a big name in America. He said that because these magazines have gone, or the whole culture has gone so extreme in like erasing women from public vision, he's like, what do you think happens to Bachram when they grow up, and like they don't know how to deal with it, right? Eventually they have to go out in the world, right? So both sides have a point, and then like I'm thinking like, what's the answer? Because the one side says that, look, you have to get with the times. Men and women work together, are more in touch with each other than they used to be. You have to prepare people for it. Mm-hmm. The other side says, look around the world. People are going crazy. The whole gender thing is insane. It's not like they've figured it out. They're more crazy now than they used to be. So we have to be more protective in the other direction. Right. And what's the answer?
So say like this. I'm interrupting you as you asked. So this is a famous. The Rambam brings this up, I think, in the Hakdama to Avos or Parakashe, like one of the two. And there's one of my favorite svarim ever is in the Rambam La'am, they included Hakdamas, the 3 Hakdamas of the Rambam,
Okay.
Hakdama of Mishnah, the Hakdama of Aves, and the Hakdama of Perkachelek in the of Sanhedrin. And for me, that's like a
Very interesting.
very important book to me. I've learned it many, many times. And he says there, he asks this question. He says, and we'll get to the Rebbe speaks about this too. He says is that any extreme is bad, right? And
Right.
This is and something that I didn't know, and it's almost the first thing I learned when I learn with a Friar person is in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the midas that a person should train themselves to behave by is based off this Rambam, basically.
The Midas Habeinini.
No,
What is it
no,
called?
it's
Midas
not,
Hamsai?
yeah, but what does that mean? The context of it is that for a person to eat too much is bad.
Right.
To eat nothing is bad.
Right.
For a person to have too much emotion is bad. Too little emotion is bad. To give too much money away is bad. To not give money away, so it comes to the middle path.
Right.
Moderation. He says so. But everybody will have their own version of a middle path.
Right.
So the answer is that's halacha.
Halacha.
Yeah, halacha is our objective middle path because it allows us to deal with our entire humanity. Every part of our humanity is addressed in halacha in a specific way, in a specified way.
Right.
And that is, I think, the answer to all questions.
Yes.
That's
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to bring the Rambam because I didn't remember that, or I don't know if I've learned that part of the Rambam, but I see it very much, and I hate to blame my ideas on the Rebbe, but I see it the same idea where boys and girls could be printed in the same disposition magazine, but they have to be printed on separate sides out of.
Yeah.
There's a halachic literalism which isn't being narrow-minded and small. It's understanding that these are frameworks that have been built up over centuries.
No, yeah, and we also believe that the truth of Torah.
Right.
That's the truth and the
right
and the instruction of Torah is in that framework of halacha. And I would like to say the Rebbe was a big advocate for that, though you will find famously, I think it was like a Yud Beis Tamasecha on with regards to the Frierdiker Rebbe going the Ma'ila Mitam V'das in terms of Mesiras Nefesh for Russian Jewry,
right,
where the Rebbe brings that Rambam, because the Rambam says there, Lo Daich Mashe Asr Lach Torah. Is it not enough for what Torah made Asr for you? What are you pursuing to take on more? And the Rebbe implements the idea of Mesiras Nefesh, L'mayla B'tam V'das. So that becomes, and I don't know a very reasonable way in my limited understanding to reconcile that idea, and that does become a pillar of being a Chabad chossid, and it is an active ingredient in our life, which we need. The difficulty is knowing when to exercise it or not, is the idea of Mesiras Nefesh, L'mayla B'tam V'das. And that becomes, I find, the nature and the voice for all sorts of Wildkeit, so to say,
right,
is that statement of that we're L'mayla B'tam V'das and we go Mesiras Nefesh, which we do and we need to have.
right.
And we need to be Mesiras Nefesh for everything. But the question is that sort of a blanket statement but then you don't have...
It can't be.
It can't be. So
that would be the answer, in my view. The answer would be that halacha and tam v'das is a baseline.
Yeah.
You cannot have l'mayla tam v'das as a baseline for a very simple reason.
No.
Because we're human beings, number one. And so anybody that tells you l'mayla tam v'das is a baseline is lying to you and to themselves. Right. And secondly, just by definition, if l'mayla tam v'das is tam v'das, then it's no longer l'mayla tam v'das.
But we do believe in that value, meaning it is a essential...
But not as a baseline. Not as a baseline.
It's not a baseline.
It's something that you strive for and maybe attain.
But you do also need to act on at times.
Fine. But that's not don't substitute that.
But
for
I don't know.
Tamadas.
I just don't know how to fully articulate that in.
But that's precisely the point. What you said about the Rambam is powerful in the sense that what's the point of a baseline? The baseline is this is what applies to everyone.
Yeah.
That's what a baseline is. If you want to do Mesiras Nefesh, God bless you, man. Yeah. Right? But when you insist that the other person does it too, now that's just cruelty.
Yeah. The argument then is, and I think it's a correct argument, is when the Rebbe sort of demands it, we abide by it. But the question is, did the Rebbe always demanded and constantly for every situation, for every decision in one's life.
When people say the Rebbe demanded it, what does that mean? Where did he demand it?
No, in that sikha, for example, is that when
He
it comes to
he
saving another
demanded it.
yid,
He demanded it, or he told people to strive for it, and
no, there are times of demand. I don't want to sort of go into that specific debate, but there is definitely a expectation of a chossid to live into realities, to be l'mayla mitamadas. But and to be honest, I think it's a difficult way of living. But first of all, something is important is to admit that reality, meaning
right.
is to and like you're saying, to strive to that reality. But it's hard to have that reality and try to live a functional, sort of quote unquote practical life. So it's this continuous meaning, and going back to our conversation, and even the context of the Rambam, is a person always needs to have both extremes in their brain.
Right.
But however, what you need to do is you always need to make a decision that's in front of you based off sort of your reality. But meaning the extreme of recognizing, let's go to the extreme of recognizing that to be a Chassidish Bacher means that you're all in,
right,
and you're totally removed from Gashmias. That's sort of one extreme that exists. Another extreme that exists is that you could break the person will break down and need therapy, which is a big hot topic now and things like that. That's also a true reality. But what the person needs to do is place those two realities before them.
right,
And with the guidance of a mashpia, maybe that's the answer. Someone you talk to, someone you respect, to help guide you and make those decisions in the practical way. But what you find a lot of now, and I was sort of scared you were advocating for, is the dismissal of values and saying that they're not actually, they're either completely made up,
no,
or they're totally historic examples, when that's not the case.
You were scared I was advocating for it
For
here
that.
or earlier in
No.
the podcast? Oh,
No.
no.
By saying that we need to, that Mesiras Nefesh is only something to strive for.
Yeah, it's to me, at least the way I see it, and people will take issue with it, but I see it almost the opposite, and not what you're saying, but the opposite to that argument.
Yeah.
By admitting that Mesiras Nefesh is not normal, it's not
exactly.
normative.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm respecting it more.
Yeah.
Like someone, the other day was like, "Oh, you have a podcast that makes you a shliach," and I'm like, "Actually, it doesn't."
Yeah.
Why? Not because I'm uncomfortable with you calling me a shliach.
Yeah.
Because I know shluchim,
Yeah.
many of whom I know what kind of sacrifice they actually did commit to be on shlichus, and I'm not in the same. Like it's not. We're not talking the same ballpark.
Yeah.
Like that word means something. It has real value because of blood, sweat, and tears that was put in.
Okay.
And I respect it for what it is, right? And and because I have a podcast that maybe is doing good for people, and I think it is doing good for people, it doesn't make me a shliach now, right? We're being too loose with these words, right? If Lubavitch today is the Ma'al Tamadas, that's loose. Everybody pays their mortgage, right? Yeah. Everybody's paying their mortgage. Everybody's worried about paying their mortgage. Yeah. Okay, so spare me the Ma'al Tamadas. Everybody, when push comes to shove, people also know what it means to be reasonable, and they are reasonable. There is Lubavitch opens up a window in a person's life of l'mayla tamadas, that there is that there. Don't settle with tamadas. Don't get comfortable with being rational and living this kind of balanced, Maimonidean life of Mer Nevuchim, whatever it is, and have it all. Understand that for whatever the Rambam wrote there is a understanding of circumstance, of time and place, of urgency. Yeah. And you can even the famous Tanya is in Gersa Kodesh, I think, where even though the Gemara says Hamabazbiz shouldn't be Mavazbiz more than a Chaimish, it's like, what are you talking about? There's a time and place. There's a time and place for extremes too. There's a time and place for sacrifice, and that's the story of Lubavitch. Years and hundreds of years of sacrifice and commitment despite the odds, and it continues to this day. But you cannot normalize the abnormal.
So this is I don't know really how we got here, but this is the discussion of like what it means to work for Parnasa and believe, right? It's all that arena of balancing the two, the complete bitachon and the complete recognition of Elam Hazeh, that it exists.
Right, similar, yeah. I want to get back to your art. I mean,
Yeah.
we've kind of covered how you got to your art, but you're talking interesting before, and I didn't expect this in the conversation, but I think it's a fascinating thing, and I want to probe it a little bit more. Is this idea of painting as a post Gimel Tammuz artist?
Yeah.
Because I like I said, I saw your art. I've never seen your art as like an expression of being a Lubavitcher. If anything, I kind of thought, okay, he kind of keeps his art at arm, like separate, like it's like a business that he has, like similar in that way. But it seems like there's more in like you're even if you're not painting necessarily a chossid,
Yeah.
and it might be hanging in the home of someone who's not even Jewish, maybe,
Yeah.
but you're expressing something. You're making a comment on this.
Yes.
Let's talk
Exactly.
about that.
That's a good point. So you coined that term. It's for the better, for the worse. Interesting. Post Gimel Tammuz artist.
I say you don't see it that way.
I see it. I just see it very individualized. Like I don't like all these labels on things. I'm just very not into them, and I see them as a point of reference, and that's true, but not as a necessary way to relate to it.
Okay, so I didn't mean that your art is post Gimel Tammuz art. What I
Right,
mean is
okay.
that you live in a time that's
Yeah.
post Gimel Tammuz. The reason I saw it this way, or I'm seeing it this way, is as you said earlier, that you are inspired by an artist like Handel Lieberman,
Yeah,
but you don't live in his times,
yeah,
and you have to paint
right,
in your
right.
terms.
So right.
So in that sense, if you look at the chronology, right,
No, so I think
that's
yeah.
how I.
But I think, and this is a reality and again, a historical fact of my life, and I think it'll be resonant with many people, is that growing up in shlichus in a secular, your neighbors they're not from or not Jewish,
Right.
and in my case, like we live in Hampstead, which is maybe a little bit of an affluent neighborhood and things like that. It does open your eyes. You do, even if you're looking down, you'll see shoes that you won't see on Kingston Avenue. It does open your eyes to a reality, to a visual language, a currency that exists in Elam Hazeh, good, the bad, the ugly, that a chossid previously wouldn't be exposed to. You're exposed to a whole visual language just by being, you could be the most chassidish shliach, whatever. You become aware. You become exposed to this whole visual language that the chassidim of the past, probably Handel had it actually, but the chassidim of the past did not have or weren't exposed to.
Right.
Why I'm saying that is because that exposure to Olam Hazeh in that way became just another language for me to express myself, to express even Jewish ideas. Meaning to say is that just the way the reason why, I don't know exactly why, but the reason the painting looks like that is because a lot of those imagings and things like that were just things that I've seen throughout my life.
In people's living rooms.
People's living rooms. Yeah, sat on people's living rooms and things like different items and things like that. And that just gives you a bigger palette of things to paint on. And I do think my style specifically, I mean, you could sort of dig into the psychology of it, but on many levels, even in my like art statement, I try to express, and I think this is relevant in the Hasidic community too, is that my art, the people are not wearing yarmulkes, but they also don't have any facial hair or anything like that usually.
Right.
That it's just states of being, so to say. So, for example, one of my favorite paintings it's called Pondering the Light. And it's maybe you need to know what it is before you see it. It's two people. I'm already giving the interpretation. It's two people sitting at night. There's like a moon in the background. There's Sfarim on both sides of them. There's a sefer in the middle. And one person's hands on his head on the table, and the other person, his hands up literally like this, and like there's the light bulb from the ceiling that's in the area of their hand. So there's a million ways to look at that. I mean, pondering the light could be a literal thing that this individual is looking at the light bulb.
I'll put the painting. I'll put the painting on the video.
Okay.
But walk me through, for people listening, walk me through the process of making it before you get to the interpretation.
No process. make a quick sketch, and it just starts to happen.
You come to the studio one
A
day,
blank canvas,
blank canvas.
and
You're not like I want to make something about chavros and yeshiva.
no. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a paper and pencil and just make a stick figure person here, stick person there, and just to understand
See what happens.
and just see what happens, and I just stare on the canvas, and that's basically what I do. And then, and you maybe should reference this too. After I made, when I was probably 70% through it, I found this picture, this painting that I loved from my whole life, like of two. I think it's called the Lernen von Samach Vav of Handel Lieberman, and I could send it to you too.
Yeah, please.
And it is the exact same posture of the two chassidim learning with their beards and everything, of these two people in my picture that are sitting with their hand over a book.
You had seen this painting earlier.
I've seen this painting earlier, but I did not copy it. I didn't do
it
any.
It was inside you, maybe.
Yeah, I did. Once I was almost done the painting, I'm like, I know that I have this image from somewhere.
Right.
And I went and I found the painting, and I had an art show, and I actually put the painting.
No, but you were
in the description.
Well, the reason I asked you for that, the reason I asked you for the background of how you made the painting is because you were like toggling between interpreting it and describing it.
Yeah.
So your interpretation yourself comes after you paint it.
In a way, but yes, the personal element. But I think, but my point that I want to say is that in the painting, I think there, at least for me, there's a certain truth in it. There's a certain.
But were you painting chavrusas? Were you painting svarim?
No,
because you described it as svarim. That's what you saw after you painted
and this
it.
is even when I was in yeshiva.
So when did you see the svarim?
I always made pictures of a person sitting next to svarim. I'm saying that there was a period when I was just doing like some of this art that you see now. It's from a few years ago. I don't know if I should say that or not. But is that I was sort of experimenting and being much more filled with the art. But now I've come to a very focused, there's a word for it, practice in my art. And they almost all come from me looking at pictures on the side of the Gemara, on the back of a test, on the back of a sheer paper, a Marmakaimis paper, things like that. Yeah, and things like that. And they almost all come from those drawings that I made as a bacher.
Wow.
And for me, because that's the thing, it's pondering, trying to understand what this is all about.
What are you trying to understand? What are you trying to understand? You're trying to understand your Baruch Shiyaran? You're trying to understand what it means to sit with the Sefer?
No, I'm trying to depict that a person can only see the light through a Sefer. Meaning that a person in that zone, when they're with Sfarim, they're learning and they're participating. Meaning they're not learning because they're Hachana for Gimel Tammuz and they're going to read through Vata Tetzaver or something like that. They're learning a Maimer, a Sicha, a Siman in Shulchan Aruch, a Daf Gemara, because that is the truth and the core of their existence and their window to the heavens, so to say. That's what I'm trying to depict. That's what I believe, and that's what I'm trying to sort of, I hope at least in some reality, strive for in life.
Why do you think you're coming back to it now?
Because I think it took a lot of time to, first of all, have the skills to do it, and also to be confident enough in seeing myself in that way and being comfortable to present myself in that way. And so I think it's like a certain sense of maturity.
You're saying?
Meaning to be so honest, so vulnerable, so to say, of what I feel I represent.
You mean okay? So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so that I understand that. What I'm understanding from you is that you're making in a way it's the first time that you're making a very specific comment on life. You're not just like I'll make some flowers, I'll make some people, whatever. I'll make stuff that's nice, but I'm actually making a comment here. Like I'm actually saying something.
Yes.
And for that you needed time to really be sure that you meant it.
Yes, and I think the flowers. And I speak about this because with galleries and things like that, not Jewish, secular completely, and we speak about the flowers too. And I do think what it was then was like what Usher Lev. I don't even want to say it. Like those, meaning like there's an expectation that artists should paint certain things,
Right.
and I wanted to be very vague. And I felt like if I want to pursue my art, if I want to express myself, flowers is the most powerful thing to do. So there's a very strong comment there too, but it's not overt. It's not specific. It's not really saying anything. It's just saying that I'm trying to express myself. I am expressing myself in a very non-conformist way, but I'm not really saying what it's about at all.
So what were you saying?
I'm saying is that I'm a creative. I'm pursuing this. I'm doing it in a way that's either
kosher.
hasn't done before and not popular, but still sort of kosher and not rogue and not rebellious, which I still think is the case, but there's a lot more, there's a much greater description of what that means now.
Yeah, look, I think I know you don't like the labels, and I understand also why it doesn't really add to your labels, but I think there's more to it. There's more to this idea of post Gimel Tammuz in the art. Well, I'm not okay. I'll tell you what I think. You tell me if you don't like it. No, because I'm not trying to harp on an idea. I think at the end of the day, what does post Gimel Tammuz mean? Okay, everybody can say what it means for them. I don't decide for you what it means. I certainly don't decide for anybody else what it means. But I think as a generalization, as like a foundational level, it means that people have to kind of take ownership for themselves, right? Meaning, yes, you can follow the Rebbe's directives, but you have to decide how you understand those directives. You have to sift through what you think is true and what you think is not true, and what's been added on truthfully and what's been added on untruthfully, and so on, right? And art is just in a way a kind of focused expression of I need to put down on canvas in a way that other people can see a comment on life.
I don't care if other people can see it.
No, but I'm not saying you, but art in general is like I'm putting something on canvas. Like you said it. You said earlier, an expression of an inner voice that now comes to life. It's not protected by my skull, right?
Yeah.
It's out there now. Other people can see it, or they won't see it, but they can see it. Exactly. They could see it, right? And I have to make a comment about life, and I'm not necessarily sure. Like, you don't know for a fact that what the Rebbe would say about it if he came to your art gallery. There's no way you'll know. How are you supposed to know?
Yeah, you can say that sort of about everything. I do sort of believe and try to learn. I'm quite sort of confident, meaning you do find examples of the Rebbe in art, so to say. So I really don't even have a question in my mind or a hesitation.
But I think you're discounting because, okay, fair. And I don't mean to pigeonhole you into my own little conniption here, right? Yeah. But I think you're discounting because at the end of the day, your art is not traditional Jewish art. Yes. At the end of the day, you're making comments on life that like you said is a bold statement about what you think about certain ththings. Yeah. Right. You had to pursue something that at the time was very unconventional, and you did not have a permission slip straight from 770, let's say, right? All these things you're kind of discounting. Yes, you're saying that the reason you feel that way is because you're very convinced that in what you see as true, this is completely in sync. Yeah, fair. But that's my point. Okay, I get to what you're saying. That's my point. My point is that this is what it looks like. What do we think it looks like? Yeah. You see, a lot of times, I think it's actually a very valuable kind of give and take here, because very often people say post Gimel Tammuz is rebelliousness. Yeah. No, it's not what I mean by it. Post Gimel Tammuz doesn't mean do whatever you want. Post Gimel Tammuz means we sailed on and now we forget the past and kind of move on from the past. It's an appreciation, like you said earlier, of the time and place you live in. You don't live in the 60s or the 70s or whatever time other guys lived in.
But I think that's sort of the truth of the existence, meaning...
Right.
Yeah, which I hope, and I think that's what you're saying now. I didn't understand it initially, but that's the truth of the Rebbe in a certain way, the endurance of the message of the Rebbe. And I was thinking in my mind now, it's a very radical way to say it, but like in the famous Sikha, like the Gimel Tammuz, where the Rebbe was and overemphasized, and even from what's it called? That the Rebbe said, "I did everything I can."
Right.
All that basically is, I think it's pretty obvious. I'm sure people will disagree. The Rebbe's wish for Chassidim to take complete ownership
Right.
over what it means to be a chassid. And I think this is a huge, again, parenthetically in this regard, it's a huge topic in Lubavitch culture, and I think in all of Judaism, but specifically, is the idea of not outsourcing your Yiddishkeit. So the famous idea of differentiating between Chabad and Chagas, or in Polish Chassidus is the tzaddik b'emunasa yichya yichaya.
Right.
And the Rebbe's very strong emphasis is that Rebbe is not a place to outsource your Yiddishkeit. And quite frankly, I think it was a natural reality that instead of going for pizza on a Matzah Shabbos, people going for Kosher Bracha or things like that.
Right.
The point is that no matter how intense it was that Chassidim were Chassidim and following what the Rebbe said, there was a certain reality that because there was a place to go, your Yiddishkeit was outsourced in a certain reality by the Rebbe. And I think you find it with everything. This is also another thing I wanted, like I thought consciously about before, that I want to emphasize in this subject, is you still find it now. People outsource Yiddishkeit.
Right.
For yeshivas, people send their kids off to yeshivas. They could have a house that is completely unaligned with Lubavitch values and Chassidish values, and they'll try to get their kids into Chassidish yeshiva like that, and it's usually torture.
Right.
Because this is a person, for whatever reason, they're completely unaligned themselves and their way of life, and I'm not judging their soul or the relationship with the Eibush, just in a practical way. The tools they were given at home are completely unaligned with any form of Lubavitch schooling.
Right.
And that too is a sense of outsourcing your Yiddishkeit to a place outside your home or outside yourself. You even find it, again, I'm going on a little rant here, you even find it with people and Torah learning. Like they'll show up at a shir because there's the Talmid Chacham in the town, there's the learner in the town, the mashpia in the town to sit down by Fabring, and the guy who wears a white shirt or something silly like that, and they'll outsource their Yutas Kislev to that person.
The professional chossid.
Yeah, exactly. They'll outsource their Yutas Kislev to the person. They'll sit there for an hour or two with the Fabringen. They'll have a little chaim or something like that, where there's no person.
Right.
There's no complete ownership of what it means to be a chassid, what it means to have a relationship with the Rebbe, what it means to be a Yid. And going back to this idea of post Gimel Tammuz, and in a way it's comforting for me. I was born after Gimel Tammuz. My name is Mendel. It's in a way beautiful to see it that way, where, and in your words, to be noticing the fact that, meaning my relationship with Chassidus, the Rebbe, the Eibishter, and all that is at a place of complete ownership. It's a place of complete individuality, not in the sense of freedom to do whatever you want, but recognizing that Eina Davar Tala Elabi, that if I want to live a life, raise a family with the Rebbe, with Lubavitch values, with Frumkeit being relevant, there is nothing, no force in this world that will be an active ingredient in that, unless I'm at the forefront of that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. It's the attempt to bring together all the different parts that make your life and your moment unique.
Yeah.
Right. It's, to kind of go through the conversation again, to bring it all together. You're talking about the time and place in which you're born. You're talking about the exposure that you had. Something that I've discussed with a number of people on the podcast. Growing up on shlichus and being on one hand growing up a Lubavitcher, but also being very comfortable and familiar with the world around you, and that coming to you as part of your world, not part of. You didn't go into that world like maybe your parents go into that world. That was your world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
you went into the yeshiva world. That's part of your life also, and what that all does is it creates a circumstance that's uniquely yours.
Yeah.
And no one else can do that for you.
Yeah.
Even in a way, the Rebbe can't do it for you. I mean, not in a way, in every way, the Rebbe can't do it. That's the whole design here.
Yeah.
right? You
No,
have
that's the instruction of the
right,
Rebbe.
right.
That's the Rebbe's design, so to say.
It's God's design.
Yeah.
God's design is that there's a Rebbe, and then there are many chassidim who are then instructed by the Rebbe on how to elevate their lives in the way that only they can.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, to make a comment with that through art and the way that you're doing, and to see how you're figuring out as you go about it a way to, I don't know if the word's to reconcile, but to hold in
Yeah.
tension.
I think it is reconcile.
You
Meaning
feel
it's
like
in a positive way. Meaning
you feel
that's
it's all
the
figured
Tiferes-
out.
We just had it in Kodesh Tetzvav, right? Tiferes being the fusion of many different things. Meaning like the thing, harmony is not when people talk together. It's
Right.
when people talk to it's noise, but if you sing together, but that idea of
But you
bringing the
feel it's
tensions
all
together
you feel it's all come together.
in a certain meaning, I'm still young and there's still a lot to learn and grow, but I think at in a very harmonious place in my existence and life, which is a huge gift, and I don't take for granted.
That's it. Yes, I'm not going to argue with that.
But I do want to say, I don't know where we're holding in time,
Yeah.
but I do want to say when I was holding on to my bio sort of that we went up and down with, I didn't answer the question about my parents.
Okay. Good.
And I want to say is that thank God they've been like very supportive. Of course, I think as a kid in trying to have reconcile my creative thing and like being the kid, I always had to wear something a little different, even in cheder. Before I was fully developed, is obviously a challenge. I'm overstating a challenge for them or understanding, but in terms of a grown up, they are. I wouldn't be able to do anything without their encouragement, advice, and guidance. So Baruch Hashem, I'm very, very grateful for their support. So I just don't want it to come across
that you are avoiding the subject.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I mean, I'm not going to speak. I'm not going to speak on behalf of you and your parents. That's none of my business.
Yeah.
But in general, reconciling the different tensions in one's life is what leads one to appreciate their parents, even more. So much of today's tension of generations and trauma by parents, and a lot of that has to do with the struggle of coming to terms with all the tensions within you, right? And
but tension is fine. Meaning, this is actually
if you have, it's fine if you can manage it.
Meaning, nefesh elikis, nefesh bahamas is tension.
Of course, but if you can manage it, if you can place what's what and learn what's what and name them, right?
Yeah.
So much of what's important about managing tension is just naming what is what.
Yeah.
This is this.
Yeah.
This is coming from here. That is coming from there, right? And this is what we've been discussing the whole time. The different kind of, recognizing that this is from here. This is maybe not from here. This is true. Maybe this isn't true.
Yeah.
Right. And so, managing that tension and learning to live with that tension, I think, allows you to look back at your childhood, because part of that tension is my childhood isn't what I wanted it to be. I'm very different to who I was as a child. How do I live with that past that kind of embarrasses me or makes me upset about certain things that happen, right? There's all kinds. There's tension of time, of past and present, right? And learning to manage that tension in general allows you to manage that particular tension as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so much of the tension between generations is a symptom of not managing our own tensions and the own internal kind of conflict. Yeah. And I feel that, I feel that the two are very much connected. And this.
What should you say? Tension with parents?
It could be with your parents.
What are the two things you're saying that are connected?
The tension of what you described in this conversation of art and who you are as an artist and being a Lubavitcher, managing to deal with that tension. You said even to reconcile it. But I don't even know if you have to reconcile it. Learning to manage it, harmonize and living with it in a productive, constructive way allows you to look at your past also with that kind of gratitude and that kind of grace and that kind of forgiveness. if there are things that upset you from then, and that's why that's another reason why it's so important. It's so important to notice these tensions, address these tensions, name these tensions, manage these tensions, because ultimately that's what brings us together as people, between ben adam l'chavereh and ben adam, la'aviv,
Yeah.
to his father. It's another reason why I feel that conversation is so important, because people are like, conversation is just a conversation, you know. Right. Okay. So that in a way kind of sounds like more like a school addict, like
No, I don't believe. I'm saying there's certain schools that we believe in. I don't believe there's any.
no, but it's more like, okay, fine. So it's me. Okay, maybe not the word school addict, but it's like, okay, it helps you.
Yeah.
I think it is, because a lot of times politicians or people like, oh, let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Conversation feels like you're just pushing it off. Like, go do
No.
the hard work.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, conversation is obviously not the only work that one must do,
Yeah.
but it is integral
Yeah.
kind of work, because that dance, or that figuring out with another person, or with a parent, or with an older generation, that may, whether it's your specific mashpia, or someone who reminds you of your mashpia, whatever it is, that conversation allows us to realize that these tensions can be managed. We don't have to obliterate the other side to live with ourselves.
Which I find so popular, and it's I understand people are in a lot of pain, but I don't know. I feel it's very hurtful for me, and I say this with the liberty of making or what I believe, that I'm like this person in the Welt, so to say, seeing a lot of the secular world, and the art world in general, but this culture of like complete dismissal of chossid, of values, and which are generational truth, so to say, and I do think, and I very much think, some of the people that could have, and as I described my experiences, could have sort of said those truth, could have packaged them in a very hurtful and times evil and cruel way, and those people could be evil and cruel, but which I know is hard for people, but completely to dismiss the possibility or the reality, or try to completely change what those truths are, is also very, very, very difficult. It's very hurtful.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it. I see it all around.
Yeah.
And I see it very much with the feedback to the podcast, and so pretty much anything that I talk with people on the podcast, anyone else can see for themselves. I only edit out slivers of it.
Right.
But what people don't see, because I can't share all of it, is what people were kind of reach out to me with. Some people that I knew before, and many people I never met before.
Right.
And obviously that's not even representative at all of what's going on out there, right? Just what I see. And there's a lot of when people say there's hurt and there's pain, I mean, people mean all kinds of things at this point, which kind of makes the words unintelligible. But what I mean by it is that there's this sense of unresolvable tension, or unresolvable questions, or conflict, and like there's nothing that hurts more than feeling that I have this problem, I'm gonna have to live with it, and I can't solve it, and I have no tools to solve it.
Yeah.
Right. And that is pain.
Yeah.
Right. That's pain. It's something that won't go away, and it's here, stubborn, and it won't go away. And I think that there are many things that need to be done, and many ways to address it. But I think one of the ways is to one impulse is, okay, so let's just, the younger generation is too full of themselves, let's shove it down their throat. But the younger generation doesn't need to listen anymore, so now we just kind of do whatever you want. Just please come back once in a while to say hello. I mean, like just don't hate me, and don't out me on some podcast down the road, whatever. And both of those are extremes of not dealing with the challenge that is tension, that is questions, that is conflict. Like, I see the world one way, you see the world another way. You could be my brother, you could be my son, you could be my wife, you could be myself 10 years from now. Right? We see the world differently.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's not only okay, that's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
Right? And it doesn't make it easy though.
Yeah.
It's hard to go talk to someone and feel like you're being put on the spot, or feel like you might feel like you're wrong. That person might have a point.
Right.
It's hard. You may have your priors shaken a little bit. You may be like, okay, wait, I'm not so sure about what I was sure about 10 minutes ago or an hour ago.
But I do think even in that context, there needs to be, and this is, I think, the most difficult part, and there's, in the extremes, it's hard to, there needs to be a agreed upon truth. Meaning, let's say in the religious aspect, I'm talking about people who are still involved in religious life. I'm not talking about a real catastrophic trauma, which is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like within the growing up Lubavitch life and from life and from culture and all that. There's still, we both need to have the same Eibishter and the same Rebbe, so to say, at a certain point. I don't. I mean, it's difficult, but my point is that when
you can't be a free for all where everybody decides
exactly, it
for
can't
themselves.
be that we agree to disagree and we're both officially living the same life in a certain way. Again, this is a conversation of its own, but my point is, in this context, there can't be we need to mean the same thing when we say Lubavitch, when we say a Chabad chossid, and in some context.
Well, this is a problem with postmodernism. The problem with postmodernism is that it's all, it's wonderful that everyone is expressing themselves more, let's say, authentically, and not just painting the mountain exactly how it is, but how they see it, and they're appreciating the light in their own way.
I agree, and there's many people.
But at some point, the whole thing becomes so discombobulated that we don't even agree on what reality is. We don't even agree if it is a mountain.
So so I feel like in a way, culturally, sometimes we get there.
Right.
But the truth is, in the art world, is not like that anymore. That was a phase. In the art world and even in the world of philosophy and whatever, that was a phase. That was a time that sort of has passed now, where people are saying that there needs to be some form of metric of reality. Right. There's still a fight with that, but there's still a strong point. There is no more full. The world's a blank art, even as a blank canvas and things like that. Many people started to advocate that there does need to be some form of objective standard, and I'm saying it also with regards to being a chossid. I don't know how there can be no objective standard. That doesn't mean we agree with all the details, but to have zero starting point or end point, and just throw everything up in the air, and it's just about what I call myself. It sounds like a different type of
Fair. I think it is going in that direction. I don't think everything follows exactly the world or vice versa, but I think it is going in that direction. It's a kind of natural kind of tendency. I don't see that in the world. I'm not. Maybe in Australia things are different, or the art world things are different. But I think the world's going more and more off the rails. Yeah. But I think it's a tendency where people at some point say, I'm fed up with this kind of arbitrary reality where I decide for myself and you decide for yourself, and nobody knows what's what anymore, and we're talking at cross purposes. Let's get real. Let's get honest. Yeah. I think that's happening more and more. I think people are getting, in that sense, more honest and more.
But that leads to discovering, I hope, at least in Yiddishkeit, that there is a starting point.
Yes, that's a point, right? So you'll have, for example, a renaissance of people learning Chovos HaLevavos.
Yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
What's that? People discovered Chovos. Yeah, some people heard about Chovos HaLevavos the first time, but that's a cynical take, and true to some extent. But there's also part of people went into business. They thought for a while that the questions of bitachon and parnasa don't apply to them because they're Lubavitchers and shlichus, whatever. And eventually they're like, no, I need to be grounded in a text and a way of thinking that's real. And I don't want to read excerpts, and I don't want to get it in some book called Trust in God We Trust, or whatever, some cutesy book that no, I want to learn it. And if there's Chassidische Pirushim on it, I want to learn that too. But I want to get grounded in the idea. So I mean, that's just an anecdote, but I think you see in the halacha too. People
Yeah.
stop hacking me a chinik about this is how it is. No, tell me where it comes from, and let me be grounded in what's what, right? And I think that's happening more and more because at the end of the day, and this has been my most like hopeful takeaway from the podcast and talking to people is at the end of the day, people are reasonable. People are down to earth. People live their lives. They need to support their family. They need to be there for their spouses, for their kids. They have wonderful moments of happiness. They have terrible moments of grief. We're all human at the end of the day, okay? And so the baseline is that reality is gonna if you ignore reality, reality is gonna punch you in the face. That's tam v'das.
Right.
Reality, right?
Yeah.
Right. And if you dismiss it, and, it's going to punch you really, really hard in the face.
If you live, there are times that you do need to.
Yes, I say if you dismiss it, not if you pause it or you suspend it, but if you dismiss it out of hand that doesn't exist, it will punch you in the face, right? And by the way, there may be some people who are built to be punched in the face all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, but most people aren't. So the point is that people eventually say, okay, you know what? I need something that is real and I need to be grounded. I cannot live in the air.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening. Of course, the challenge is that even when people feel like they're grounded, this person feels that he's grounded in the truth and it maybe doesn't align exactly with what is. At the end of the day, that's part of being human beings. That's always been the way. Even halacha has disagreements, and Gemara of course has disagreements. There's different ways of coming, and you hope that you're right. You hope you're even one of the 70 versions of right, and you may not be. You may be from the versions of wrong.
Yeah.
But you're striving to get somewhere. You're striving to meet somewhere. That's what we're after.
Yeah.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for making the time. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Tzor and Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.